Hey, Robert. How's it going today?
Hey, Alan, what's going on?
Nothing too much. Just we're back in the sauna. It's about 82 degrees in here,
Yeah,
which is actually quite cool.
it dropped
What
down.
it usually is.
Dropped down to 101 outside, so it's pretty nice.
You know, we're in our pretend studio, but we like it.
Yep.
It builds character. We're used to the heat, but we wanted to talk about a book that we've both read, and this is in relation to both our careers. Now, this isn't just limited to our careers. These are concepts, these are principles and things that we've learned, but these can apply even in our personal lives or even in the ministry. But there are also parallels that we're obviously going to take with Scripture.
Well, let me back it up and let me ask you a question, just to kind of kick this off. So, when you first became an official manager, that's your title at work. How much, aside from what you had to learn independently, how much training, guidance, coaching, did you receive to help prepare you to be a manager?
First of all, I've got to pat you in the back because it's a very leading question. It's like you're looking for a very specific answer, and that's a very manager thing to do. But in all seriousness, when I became a manager, I wasn't trained to be a manager, and what I've learned is most places don't do that.
Right.
I think the common thing that a lot of people, or the common thing that happens a lot, is people see that you're really good as an individual contributor. You know how to knock things out. You're just really good at knocking out tasks and achieving results, and so people think well, we got to promote that guy into a leadership position because they're just going to be a good manager. I'm sure there's a fallacy in there somewhere. And what ends up happening is they might have been a really great individual contributor, but they're terrible.
Right.
They're a terrible manager, and sometimes they end up being micromanagers, or they're terrible leaders.
Right.
And
they may have been, let's just say, a technician. I'll just use technician or engineer, whatever title you want to use for individual contributor. They may have been a wonderful individual contributor, right? Top of their team, extremely productive, very effective at their job, subject matter experts, whatever you want to label them. And then somebody goes, man, that guy has manager potential. And so the manager the previous manager is like, man, I want that guy. I'm going to start grooming him to be a manager. But what they mean by grooming him is they start to delegate more tasks and jobs off of himself and try to give to that individual. But he never trains them how to think and operate and behave like a manager, and not to adopt very specific steps and processes. So the assumption is, just because a guy's a great individual contributor, he's going to make a great manager. So that's true in my industry. I know in your current industry, that's the way I've been I've been in my industry for almost 30 years.
Yeah, I've been doing this nearly 20 years in a professional career now. And it's extremely rare when I see somebody who is groomed correctly, who is actually taught and coached to be a good people manager. It's very rare. It's hard to find it. I think there are some companies, and I'll answer the question here in a minute, but I think there are some companies that have good programs where they give you a lot of material and they give you a bunch of tools, and there's just loads and loads and loads of tools for things like performance reviews, one-on-ones, individual development plans, and I think we're just overloaded with tools.
Would you say in light of what in light of that, would you say that there's probably a ton of resources when it comes to management theory?
Yes, and that was another thing I was going to get to. And I've read, there's just so many leadership books that are out there. You just type in leadership in Amazon and probably you'll get 1,000 results of what people think good leadership is and how you should lead your team. And I've read the John Maxwell books, and there's a they're good books. Like
Yeah.
they tell you
The Franklin Covey stuff. I mean, you take,
yeah.
I mean, almost any management leadership type book out there, and all of them, I'm not saying they're bad. All of them have great elements to it. But
Yeah.
what would you say,
There's-
what's missing?
There's one distinction is that these other books tell you, well, you need to do this. This is what you need to do. The biggest thing that they're missing is the how.
Right.
They don't tell you how to be an effective manager.
Yep.
And that's what's always, most of the time, that's missing. So
And I'm going to tell you, just from my perspective, going into management 20 plus years ago, the thing I was scared, the thing that I guess I feared the most was I have no clue how to be a manager. I have no idea how to influence a team to do the right thing. I have no idea how to build relationships with these people. I have no idea how to get them on board with my vision. And that is probably the scariest thing coming from, and I was a senior technician for a good 10 years, and I was very good at what I did, but I was scared to death when I had a responsibility to lead a team.
yeah, I mean, I'll admit too that I didn't walk in confidently like, all right, guys, we're gonna get it done now.
Yeah.
It wasn't that easy at all. It was challenging because one, you don't have the guidance and knowledge and coaching to do it right. And so you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. And that was really part of the journey was figuring a lot of this stuff by trial and error, making mistakes and finding whatever resources that were out there. And you and I are pretty resourceful. We're gonna dig for solutions and read books and look at YouTube videos
Yeah.
and research things online because we want to do the best that we can and we want to do it right. And it was hard. It was hard at first.
Yeah.
And you got all these leadership books, like I mentioned, that will tell you, well, you need to be influential. You need to lead from the front. You need to gain respect. It's like, okay, well, how do I do that? How do
Right.
I get
Like,
respect?
what is that?
How do I influence others?
Yeah, what does that look
to
like?
do that? That's exactly it. So, and you had all these inspirational books from these leaders, these CEOs, and they're successful, but it was all the same stuff. Like I read a ton of them, and they all exhibited the same type of content.
There was probably one
They just
author.
didn't tell you how.
Well, let me put it this way: there was probably one author that I would say made the greatest effort moving forward to be more practical, and that's Peter Drucker. So when you read things like Effective CEO and some of his other management books, because here's the thing: what's funny is that Peter Drucker didn't have a master's in business administration, but he was a master when it came to a lot of the practical advice. Effective CEO wasn't for CEOs; it was actually for frontline people, direct reports. So, but like to your point, there was no practical step-by-step how to do this. So
Yeah.
I've always categorized it this way: most management theory and leadership theory books are descriptive, where in the book we're going to talk about today, which is Effective Manager by Mark Horstman, is actually prescriptive, not
Yes.
descriptive. He actually gives you the step-by-step process to follow. You see what I mean? So that's the thing that I saw that really helped me. And like you were saying, you and I are resourceful. We're going to do our own research. We're going to kind of dig into, and I did, man. I was reading books. I was listening to, I was watching TED Talks on leadership. I was like trying to, like everything. I was trying to uncover every stone. Like, what books can I read? And it came to like, oh, well, you got to build relationships with other people. Okay, well, how do I do that? Oh, well, you got to lead your team through effective communications. Well, what does that mean?
What are the communicate?
Yeah.
How do you do the communications?
How do I know it's
what's
gonna-
the tools
Yeah.
that you use to effectively do that?
Yeah.
And even today, they tell you those things, and they're right things. Like
Right.
in my job, but they don't tell you what are the key tools that allow
Yeah.
you to execute on those things. Right?
What
To
behaviors?
achieve.
Yeah, what specific observable behaviors should I be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
Yeah. So the answer to your question that I should have been answering like 5 minutes ago is no. There
Right.
isn't-
Nobody trained us. Right.
Nobody gave us the specific training. Now, the
Right.
book that you're talking about is something that we both read, but I'd like to back up for a second because you've been a manager before I was. And so I kind of had an advantage when I did step into the management role. I was pretty ready because I was already reading these books. You and I talk all the time about good, effective management and leadership. And as an individual contributor, again, you're not limited because you don't have a title. You can be a leader without a leadership title. You should be a leader.
Yeah, exactly. You can exhibit these same behaviors that we're going to talk about. You can exhibit them as an individual contributor. You don't have to have a manager title to do this. Matter of fact, I would say, and one of the things that we learned from these folks, these manager tool guys, and that's what I was going to kind of point to first about the book. These are the guys that put the book together. Is one of the things that they say is one of the ways you're ready for promotion is you're doing 100% of your current role and you're doing 50% of the role that you want to promote into. So you're basically performing at 150%. And so, but in order to do that, you got to start learning. You got to start training yourself and things like that. So before we get to the book, though, I want to say this, because of this dichotomy we were coming into, right? You've got to be a manager. You have no management training. I came across this podcast called Manager Tools. I don't remember how. I just remember I came across it. Maybe it was because I was doing research like, how to be a leader, how to be a manager, how to be effective. You know what I mean? It was something along those lines. And I came across this podcast between two guys. They were West Point graduates. They were military officers, and they went into the business world. And they had been, at that point, they were professional consultants. So they were leadership consultants. They would go into companies and they would train and coach them on management leadership. But they started this podcast based off of the principles and the things that they were teaching. And it's called Manager Tools, literally Manager Tools. It was the tools a manager needed to actually be a manager. So one of the things that they had, I would say, they dismissed. I mean, not dismissed, but I guess what I'm trying to think of is like they kind of like eliminated the wrong perspective is that leaders are born. No such thing as a leader is born. A leader is trained. You train a leader. You want to be a good manager? You're not born with those skills. You actually have to train to be a good manager. And the reason why I say that and I kind of highlight that is because there's probably, people that are listening to this podcast that are thinking, man, and this could apply, like you said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, was like, hey, these are universal principles. It doesn't matter if you're in ministry. It doesn't matter if you're in a full-time tech job, you're in an administrative job, you are in a retail job. It doesn't matter. Whatever industry you are, a manager is a manager is a manager. These are universal principles and behaviors that apply to every management position, no matter what the industry. And the reason why, and we'll kind of get to this later on, but I mean, I believe that there are biblical principles that are baked into these management principles. So, but we came across Manager Tools. I started listening to them. Man, I paid for, that was probably one of my first subscriptions.
Yeah. How long ago did you come across?
2005. The reason why I say 2005, 2004, 2005 is because that's the first time I was actually made a direct manager over a team. And I had no clue. And the people that were running the company, I would say they probably had some struggles and challenges being leaders themselves. So I was kind of like, man, I've got to lead a team and and these were professional people. Some of them had years of experience in their roles. And I was moving into a role that I had no experience in. And I'm thinking, how am I going to lead these people? What do I do? What kind of behaviors should I be focusing on? What kind of practices and best practices and processes do I need to start learning? And I was just clueless. And so I started listening to these guys, man. I was listening to them for 2 or 3 or 4 hours a week. And I was like a sponge, man. I started learning. And I'm not saying I became the best manager, but I'm going to tell you one thing, though. They cleared the fog for me. And I was like, man, now I actually have an actionable plan to try to implement to be a better manager. And that's one thing that they did for me.
And probably about a few years after that, because again, you and I talk a lot. I started listening to the Manager Tools podcast back in the day. I mean, early or maybe late 2006, 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there. So I was listening to a lot of the concepts and the principles, the best practices of what a good manager is. And I started applying them even as a junior technician. I worked in a data center for the same company, then moved into engineering. But as an individual contributor, that helped me introduce or exhibit leadership behaviors within my team, which helped me influence others around me, help mentor them, and they became, I was actually building other people around me. And so I was a leader on the team. I wasn't a leader in title, but it was because of those principles and concepts, those concepts that I learned from those guys on that podcast. And then later on getting their books when I became a manager.
It's like
it was invaluable.
Your position as an informal leader on your team, or the opportunity to become an informal leader, was the proving ground of these concepts, right? And so, I mean, that's the one thing that I loved about them. Now, they didn't have a book at the time. It was just all podcast material. And they always had their famous saying was, well, we have a podcast for that, right? They would be like, hey, how do you do one-on-ones with your direct reports? We have a podcast for that. How do you put an effective resume together? Oh, we have a podcast for that. So that's what became literally my management/leadership Bible, if you can say that.
Yeah, or even professional career Bible, because
Right.
I remember they have so much stuff there, not just for manager specific items. Like I said, this can apply for individual contributors, but that's where I learned how to do my resume.
Yep, that's
and
right.
And that's where I really got insight to what a good resume looks like, or an effective resume. And that's
right.
probably a different topic, but just a good resume is simply your accomplishments. It's what you do and how well you've done it.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that's what a good resume should contain. It was, okay, now we're going to walk you through an example.
Yeah, and now as a manager, that helps me identify good candidates.
Yep.
By how well their resume is put together, and they're only focusing on what they've done. And
Yep.
how well they've done those things.
That's funny because, as a Christian, I would say, how do I properly defend a particular doctrine? By learning it. Once I learn the doctrine, guess what? I'm going to be able to identify, false doctrine because of it. I'm going to be able to refute and rebut bad arguments because I know their doctrine. It's the same concept. Once you learn how to put a proper resume together, guess what? Now you know how to identify bad resumes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can help and coach your people to put that. One of the things, I think it was an episode that they did years ago, but this kind of points to how practical their advice was and how beneficial. They had a podcast on how to pack for a business trip. Literally, they told you, this is what you pack. This is what it looks like. So they'll cover the principle like, hey, it's important to be prepared. It's important, like you can show up, let's say you have a business meeting and all of a sudden the CEO or a C-level or a regional director shows up, right? And you're going to have dinner with them for whatever the case is. And all you did was bring your flip-flops and a t-shirt, right? So they literally would walk you through, have at least one jacket that you can wear with 3 different, pants.
And how to mix and match and how to pack lightly.
I mean, it was literally that kind of practical advice.
But that's why it was so perfect, because it wasn't like, well, you should dress professionally because you want to make a good impression. It's like, okay, everybody knows that.
Yeah,
Thanks
your
for the
version
tip.
of professionally and my version might be two
What does
different
that
things.
mean, right? It's going to be different from
Mine's
going to
be a Sasquatch shirt with a business jacket.
Yeah, tucked into some jeans, right?
and flip-flops.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be.
No judgment. No judgment, dude. But yeah, they'll tell you exactly how to, these are some good things to dress, like a good blue blazer, because it's so universal. You can mix and match them with different slacks, and they're just so practical. And that's what I loved about these guys, because they told you how to do it. It's like, here's a manual of making a really good first impression. If you're coming into a business meeting, make sure your shoes are shined. Don't wear scuffed up shoes, or don't try to wear like tennis shoes with slacks because that looks sloppy. And I know it's trendy, but ignore it.
Yeah.
Just just stuff like that. And those are
It
just
was
some
very
examples.
practical, very
Yeah.
practical. And you know what I found going, over the years, over the last 2.5 decades, listening to these guys and following their advice. I mean, literally, it was almost like a blueprint for me. Like, hey, Robert, you're fixing to have a one-on-one. Let me pull up a template that they offered. Like, here's how this is what you say. You literally open the conversation this way. Here's the questions you ask. Here's the probing questions to kind of uncover, whatever during the conversation.
Oh, and by the way, like the asking probing questions and doing interviews, a lot of what we've been talking about, fallacies and asking questions, I think a lot of that is rooted in what we've learned in our experience and
Yep.
career by doing interviews
Right.
with people.
Right. And I was going to kind of build on what we learned, and at least what I've discovered and observed from the principles that they covered in Manager Tools. And this is funny. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not a full-time pastor. I have friends that are full-time pastors. I have talked to friends that are full-time pastors that have been full-time pastors for a long, long time. I've heard challenges that they've had. And you know what? It boils down to a lot of the same similar issues that a manager will have with a team are the same types of challenges that a pastor will have with his own staff and even people in his church. I'm not saying, like, I don't want to dismiss the spiritual aspect. Obviously, there's the Holy Spirit, right, involved. However, good practical leadership is just as effective in the ministry as it is in the business world because of that universal, unilateral principle of leadership. So, I mean, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more.
And what's the common denominator?
And the common denominator is always going to be it's true, it's biblically universally true, and it's a fact, and it works because God's behind it.
And you're dealing with people.
Yep.
And that's really it. Whether if you're in ministry,
God's not the creator. Well, he is the creator of rocks, but because they often say, what do they say? You don't manage rocks, you manage people.
Yeah.
But the point is that God has a desire to build relationships with people. That is key to him. When he put Adam and Eve in the garden, he wanted to fellowship with them, right? So anyway, kind of, and I mean, we could talk about this, man. We could probably talk about this stuff for a long, long time. But
easy.
kind of today, we wanted to discuss this book, Effective Manager, because what the book is a culmination of all their advice over almost 3 decades of business consultation, business coaching, effective management, effective leadership. They kind of finally put this book, Effective Manager, out about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And since then, they have some other books that they've put out in similar fashion. But this is such a great book. Now, listen, I don't dismiss Maxwell. He's got great laws of leadership books, things like that. Tons of really good stuff out there. The Franklin Covey stuff, George, David Allen, productivity management. I mean, I'm all for that stuff. I think those are good books that any manager should have in their library. Absolutely. And they even have, remember the Manager Tools, they always had books that they recommended. They always had a manager
Those
list.
guys.
Top listed books that they would recommend that every manager should have. But this is one of those books where it's a culmination of all those principles, those very practical steps. And what they did is they boiled them down into 4 specific key behaviors.
And this book, like you're talking about Maxwell, you're talking about Drucker, you're talking about all these other books. They are great books. I love them because I've learned a lot of leadership principles. Those are very inspirational books.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're descriptive and they sort of like want to amp you up. Like, hey, right, let's go in and do this. Let's be a good leader, which is great. This book is more of a field manual.
Yep.
And that's why I love it, because it's the how. All right, well, how do I be an effective manager and incorporate those good leadership
It's a tactician's
attributes?
book.
Yeah.
It's not just the strategy. It's like, here's the tactical step-by-step, principles that you need. And not just principles, but the actual pragmatic steps to do this. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. And this is what that looks like.
Yep, and they just break it down so perfectly. So before we start going into the 2 most important things a manager should focus on, right? And then we'll start breaking it down from there. the main thing about this book is I read this book right when I became a manager. And since then, and still today, I go back and use it as a manual because I don't remember every single thing. So I'll go back. It's like, okay, I haven't done this in a while. What if I have to build a coaching plan or whatever? I'll go back and reference the book.
Yeah.
But
there's great principles that you can constantly reinforce by going through this. But I really think you need a dog-eared, pencil, pen laden, notebook. This should be a notebook for you, highlights, things like that you can constantly refer back to.
Yeah, mine's all worn out,
Yep.
and I have a bunch of dog-eared pages to go to.
Well, let me say this real quick. I was going to say it real quick. There's friends of ours that are probably listening to this that either run their own business, they're informal leaders in their own teams, right? Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't care if you are the lead engineer as a facility management team, right? Maybe you're in charge of taking care of a piece of property, right? You're running tickets, working with, your the people that are renting, what are they called? Man, it's like slipping my mind now. Hello, idiot. I'm such an idiot. Anyway, but like you have people that are renting suites and stuff that you have to respond to, whatever the case is. These same
service desk.
No. That service desk would be issuing the tickets. I'm talking about the people that actually rent the. Man, it is like, why is this tenants? Tenants.
There you
Hello.
go. Words are hard.
Man.
Continue.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, they have tenants and stuff that they have to work with, right? And there's obviously in those tenants, you have managers, you have directors and things like that. These same principles can apply. Same things. If you work on this, it will make you, not only will it make you a more effective individual contributor, it will prepare you if one day you're chosen to be a manager. I mean, if you don't work on these things today, if you're not trying to master some of these steps and these principles and processes, today you're going to be that much less prepared when they finally give you the title manager. I always say, look, if you want to be a manager, then start exhibiting and practicing behaviors that a manager would be doing. Start that today, long before you get the title.
It's like what you said. You're doing 100% of the role that you're expected to do,
right?
But you're also doing that 50% of that role that you want to move into, which could be a leadership position or manager, and that's how it prepares you.
So
that
I
is
would,
the proving ground.
Exactly, and I would recommend, because of that, get this book. If there's one book, now there's 100 books I can recommend on management, leadership, productivity, time management, but if there's one book, I would say first and foremost, get Effective Manager by Mark Horstman. I would get it. Get the Kindle version, get a print version. I don't care what version you get. Get it and start reading it and studying it and applying it.
And I can say that my manager peers, people that have been on my team who have groomed to be managers, and they now run their own teams, or they have moved off to other companies and applied these same principles and concepts in running their teams. I've always recommended this, but I've had the privilege of building these people up from individual contributors. But I've learned from this book to do it because it does cover that.
Yep.
It prepares them for their next steps.
It's a good,
it's a focus on people.
consolidated executive summary of their 1,000 podcasts. Honestly, that's what it is. But they've boiled it down into 2 critical key components, right? Outcomes that a manager should be producing, and then 4 key critical behaviors that support those 2 components.
Before we get there, and I think that's where we should probably start moving to next, because we could probably stay here for another 20 minutes about how great this book is.
Yep.
The other thing I love about this, because again, I always say we're nerds about this. We love data, we love science and all this stuff. All of this stuff, because it's not anecdotal. It's not just storytelling and inspirational stories about how things just worked out. These guys have been in business for 20, 30 years. That means they've got about 30 years worth of data, research, and study.
Right.
They've learned all this stuff because they actually put it into practice with thousands and thousands of clients.
Yeah, this isn't just pure, assumption and guesswork. They say that's one of their favorite sayings is the data shows. This is what the data reveals. Here's what we've observed from the data that we've collected. These are deductions that these guys have made, not assumptions. These are literal deductions that they have made based off of what data they've collected, and they know that it practically works.
Exactly. And I think this will be a good segue to actually go into the two main things. And when somebody comes to you, Robert, if they ask you, what are the two most important things a manager needs to focus on?
Well, even if they didn't say the two, let's just say they said, well, what are some key important goals that a manager should strive to? Most of the time they'll say, try to be a good communicator, try to work well with your teams, try to get the most work you can do, but they never look at it from the big worldview picture. And the two major outcomes that the Manager Tools guys have baked into their whole concept, their whole perspective, their worldview, if you will, is number one, the two most important outcomes that a manager should produce is number one is achieving results. Okay. That means meeting whatever the organizational goals and targets are. You know why I think that's so important to understand? Because in my mind, we're thinking, but shouldn't I try to build relationships with my people, or shouldn't I have shouldn't I try to make my boss happy? Because that's what they think. But at the end of the day, if you say number one, your first priority is to achieve results, that means all the other gray area and the mess that will bog you down in the mire becomes extremely clear. If I've got a direct report that's coming to me, and let's just say that they're constantly having car problems and they're showing up to work late and they're constantly, there's one excuse after the other. And this actually happened to one of my direct reports, who literally had a month worth of unexcused absences. Now, you know what my as a human being, you know what my temptation is to do is to appeal to pity, to appeal to their situation and to give in to them versus saying, you know what, at the end of the day, man, I hate the fact that you're having so many personal problems, but the number one goal of our role is to do what? And that is achieve results. So if your constant car problems, your personal family problems, all those things start to hinder and to block those results or to prevent those results from happening, then I've got to make the tough choice and we've got to make the tough decision to say, maybe this job isn't right for you. So that's why understanding achieving results is so important. You bypass all the personal excuses and all that stuff. So achieving results, number one. Number two is, this is the next part, retaining people. I believe that order is important because you're here to achieve results, which means, how are you going to do that? You're going to do that by keeping the right people. But that means, and this is what's interesting, and I'm sure you've run into this, Alan, it's like whenever you interview people, I look for a reason not to hire them when I interview people. I don't look for, oh man, I really kind of like this guy, and he's got kind of a nice personality.
Confirmation bias.
That's right. It is confirmation bias. But if I can identify, if I am missing specific observable behaviors that will not produce results, I won't hire the guy. Even if he's the nicest guy out of all the candidates. At the end of the day, I would rather not hire the wrong person, right, than miss out on the right person. Because as soon as you hire the wrong person, you've just opened up a huge can of worms.
It's a Pandora's box, and I could tell you from experience that it's, again, when I said at the beginning of our podcast today, it's a headache,
right,
that you have to deal with. I mean, that's what I meant, trial and error.
Yep.
I made some mistakes and I learned along the way. But anyways,
so the foundation is understand what your role should produce. What is the goal of a manager? Every manager should be, number one, achieve results. Number one. That means metrically. That means quantifiably. That means percentage based. That means number of tickets closed. That means number of widgets produced, right? That's achieve results.
Measure what matters.
Measure what matters. That's right.
It's also a good book.
That is a good book. And then number 2, how you're going to do that by retaining the right people. So those are the 2 fundamental key goals that every manager should accomplish in their role. So the question is, how do you do that? Well, that's what the book does. The book outlines 4 key critical behaviors to accomplish achieving results and retain your people.
Yeah. And I've gotten that question before from people that have moved into a manager role. I get that question. It's like, how do you be a good manager? It's like, you got to focus on achieving results. That's number 1, and retaining those people.
That's right.
You have to retain people, good people, the right people to achieve those results. Focus on those 2 things. Everything else
falls into place.
Fall into place
and that's a good way when you're talking to somebody, if you're trying to train them to be a manager, to really refocus them. Because again, like I was getting distracted with this guy's, personal problems. Man, you can really start going down a rabbit trail, and it's not healthy, because now you're not being effective as a manager. You're focusing too much on being a guidance counselor, an emotional counselor for somebody, a marriage counselor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can run into all kinds of things that have nothing to do with those 2 accomplishments.
It is incredibly stressful when you're in those situations, and that's the hardest part about being a manager is the people,
right?
Because you will run into those things, and you're gonna have to have a dividing line of when to be empathetic, but at the same time, be able to understand what the expectations of that role is and the expectations of the business.
So I answered the 2 critical things, right? The 2 things that a manager should be focused on. You tell us, what are the 4 key critical behaviors that support those 2 outcomes?
So this will start leading us into the tools, and this is what I love about this book, because this is where it tells you, okay, well, those make sense. I need to achieve results. I need to retain people. I need to have a good attitude. I got to be influential as a leader. All right, now this is how to do it.
Right.
How do you get it done? And we're going to get into that. You need to get to know your people. And this is how you retain them.
Right.
By knowing them. You want to build strong, trust-based relationships with your directs. And the key to this, and the tool to do this is how to do it, is through consistent one-on-one meetings.
Oh, you mean, like hanging out at lunch and going to play pool with them? Ping pong.
Exactly.
Putt-putt gal. Is that
that's
what you're
where you make
about?
the connection.
Is that what you're saying?
No, that's just to go have fun. But these one-on-ones are probably, I could tell you as a manager, and I'll tell you this with confidence, and I could tell you that the most important meetings to me, it doesn't matter if it's with a VP, it doesn't matter if there's meetings with the CEO, the most important meetings with me is with my people, with my directs. Those are the most important meetings that I have.
So are you saying, like, if at least, once a semester, once a quarter, maybe once a month, meet with them?
No, all the time, man. This is how you get to know them. So I have one-on-ones. They have to be weekly. And this is the great thing about this book, because they tested this. They said, what is the most effective frequency, the cadence of these meetings? They've tried every 2 weeks. They've tried once a month. They've tried every 3 weeks. They found that every week, and making that connection every week, is the most effective.
So what if the company policy dictates that, hey, all you need to do is just meet once a month to do a one-on-one with your people?
I'll still do weeklies. And even at my company, where they won't maybe emphasize one-on-ones as much because you have too many people, and that's another conversation. If you're managing more than 10 people,
so why the one-on-ones? Why are they so important?
Because that's where you build a relationship and the trust. And
so these aren't project updates. This isn't talking about
and
metrics.
I'm glad you're teasing this out of me, because it's not a forum for me to tell them what to do, give them more tasks, have them give me work updates. It is their time; they own it. So in my one-on-ones,
so you're saying if Doug wants to talk about his puppy Fluffy,
that's what we talk about.
You're not going to say, hey, Doug, we really need to focus on those reports, those TP reports that you're supposed to get back to us.
Nope.
TPS reports.
TPS reports. Did they get the memo? Anybody get the reference from 30 years ago?
But you're saying is
They could talk
Literally.
about whatever they want.
Okay.
They could talk about their personal life. They could talk about their dog Fluffy. They could talk about, this is how you get to know them. This is how I understand. I know about my directs families and their challenges, their kids, what they like to do. And it's a key component in building that trust. Now, if they don't want to talk about that, that's fine. A lot of people just want to talk about work, and some do.
What's that old saying that if you don't let people know you care, they won't care about what you know?
That's a good saying.
So it's like you bridge that gap, right? What we call it discretionary effort. We're trying to get it out of our people, right? We want them to want and have a desire to work for us. Well, if they think that, we just see them as another number, we just see them as a metric.
Why do people leave their jobs? Do they leave it because they're leaving company? They leave because they're leaving the person that they're working for, because they lack something. They might lack empathy. They may not even care about your personal life. They may not care that you have an interest in biking or hiking or your dog Fluffy. And that actually makes an impact.
Yep.
They understand that they don't really care about your personal interests. That can affect them being retained.
So so the one key component, right? The two critical outcomes is to achieve results. Number two is to retain good people. So you're saying that the first critical behavior is to get to know your people through one-on-ones.
That's right. One-on-ones is a critical tool. Without one-on-ones, you're not going to be successful. I'm sorry.
Right.
You can say, well, I trust my people and I don't want to micromanage them. Again, that's misrepresentation. There's fallacies in that. We talked about what that means. But I just want to show that I'm trusting my people. I don't want to get in their space and in their business. And we only meet once a month, or I only meet when they want to meet. So that way, I'm just staying out of their business. The problem with that is that you're not gonna know your people.
It's interesting. And we'll get to the other three critical behaviors. But I figured, what we can do is just take each one of these and kind of show, like, okay, well, that's great in the management world, but what about in the ministry world? Well, if I was a ministry leader, or if I was a pastor or a senior pastor,
your staff,
doesn't it make sense that, hey, as a pastor, as a ministry leader, you get to know your people, who's under you?
Nothing changes.
Right.
It's not mutually exclusive in the air quotes here, secular world. These are the same principles that apply anywhere.
I think it's interesting because the Bible, talks about in Proverbs 27:23, John 10:14, that a good shepherd knows his sheep individually. Similarly, biblical leaders are, they're called to intimately know the people they led or they lead. So, look at their strengths, their weaknesses, their motivations, concerns. Jesus Christ spent 3.5 years with the apostles, grooming them and getting them ready to be the biblical foundation of the church. And he spent time with them identifying false doctrine and so forth and so on. But he spent time, he broke bread with them. He knew their weaknesses. He knew their mind, their thought. Now, of course, he was God manifest in the flesh, but the principle is still the same. He took the time to get to know his people, right? And the Bible also tells us in Galatians chapter 6, talks about ye that are spiritual, that we're supposed to bear one another's burdens. Well, how do you know what another person's burden is that you need to bear if you don't know anything about them? Right? If you're a pastor and you've got staff members who are going through emotionally difficult trials or spiritual trials, how do you become an effective pastor and leader over that group where they will trust you?
Well, what's a good attribute of leadership is empathy.
Yeah.
Is sitting down and empathizing with them, with their struggles,
right,
to make that connection.
We call it, in the business world, call it emotional intelligence.
Right.
I'm intelligent. I have intelligence about the emotions they're going through, right? I have some understanding, whatever the concept is. But the point is, trust, we always say trust is earned. Nobody's going to give you their trust implicitly because you have the title manager or the title senior pastor or the title ministry leader. If you don't effectively work to get to know your people, and I'm not talking about just playing games with them. I'm not talking about going out to dinner with them. I'm talking about literally shutting your mouth and opening your ears and hearing what they have to say.
Bingo.
Right? Proverbs 18:13, he that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it's a falling and shame unto him. Listen whether or not you may be even interested or not. It doesn't matter. listen and hear what they're saying so that you can, you can process it correctly. Maybe you know how to leverage that knowledge and understanding now and how to coach and groom them or help them through struggles and trials they might be having in their role, right? So the point is get to know your people. So you're saying get to know your people through effective one-on-ones.
Yep.
So what's another? Go ahead if you have something else.
Yeah,
to say
I just
about that.
I want to wrap this one up because another big point of why this is important is that you're obviously building trust. This will allow you to influence them to get things done.
Right. If they don't trust you, if they won't trust you, they won't listen to you. It doesn't matter how much, and you know what you end up resorting to if they don't trust you?
Role power.
Role power. That means as a manager, I'm telling you what to do because I'm your boss.
Because that's what they have to resort to.
That's it.
And here's the problem. And that's what a lot of people think. It's like, oh, well, I've got a title. You got to do what I say.
Right.
And that is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. You want to influence them to do those things.
You know what's interesting is the Bible says that a pastor is a shepherd. He's not supposed to lord over his flock. That means he's not supposed to use his role power. He's supposed to use his relationship power. How many pastors out there want the discretionary effort of their believers? They want to go out and tell others about Christ. They want to give to the ministry and financially support it.
They have a desire for it because they see your passion.
That's right.
Because you've built that relationship for them. Now,
and just as long, and you know what? It's just as wrong for a pastor to manipulate his flock to get them to do what he does. It's just as wrong for a manager.
Power.
It's just as wrong for a manager to do that.
Yeah.
Don't manipulate your people into getting them to do. You want them of their own volition and will and discretion to make that extra effort. That's what you want.
Right.
And they're not going to do that if they don't trust you.
That's right. Trust is key. And the thing is the role power piece. That's a lever that only if you have to pull it at last resort. And I can tell you right now, that role power, I probably have to use it maybe 1% of the time.
Yeah.
That's where you want to be.
That should be exactly. That should be the really the last ditching effort. And you've got to do that because because achieving results is the key, right?
Yep.
Getting to know your people and retaining them is going to help you achieve results. But you want to default on getting to know them intimately, building those strong relationships, right?
Yep. And when it comes to leadership, just transcending this conversation here, we could look at well-known military leaders like Robert E. Lee, a Confederate general, Napoleon. You know the attributes that they have. Patton, great general, very aggressive. Probably needed some help on the emotional EQ side of things, but Napoleon, for example, he knew his staff. He knew their kids' names. Knew about their personal affairs. Robert E. Lee. These were very influential generals. They were really good leaders because they exhibited a lot of these attributes.
There was a general, he took over when I was in Saudi Arabia, and this was after Schwarzkopf. He was the commanding general of all the unified forces in Saudi Arabia. Man, his name is slipping my mind. This is obviously over 30 years ago. But I remember talking to him. He had a group of us, and I was just an airman. I was nothing, He was general of the commanding forces there in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, and he asked me where I was from. I said Del Rio, Texas. He goes, oh man, Laughlin Air Force Base. He goes, yeah, I've been there, and he started talking about Laughlin Air Force Base as if he just visited there yesterday, and it just struck me as really unique that here he's talking to a group of airmen that, literally mean nothing to him as far as rank is concerned. And he knew how to have a personal, direct conversation with me about where I
Another attribute is humility.
Yep.
I mean, a good leader has humility. When you see those arrogant types, they feel like they're entitled, their role power. You're not going to follow a guy like that. You only follow a guy like that because you have to.
Build relationships.
That's right.
Like they said, like the Horstman always says, you're not managing rocks, you're managing people.
And you inspire them to do what's right. They want to do it. They don't even have to be told to do
getting to know your people.
Yep.
That's the critical behavior to support achieving results and retaining people.
Hey everyone, due to the length of this podcast, we decided to split this up into 2 parts. Robert and I loved to yap and ended up going long, which is not a shocker for us. But please stay tuned for part 2 dropping next week, where we cover the remaining points. We hope you enjoyed part 1 of The Effective Christian Manager and were able to get some encouragement, clarity, or even guidance about how one can leverage the principles learned and apply them in all aspects of life. You'll find that the attributes and behaviors of good management and leadership are rooted in biblical principles, which means that what is learned here is not just for the secular world. It's universal and effective, especially in ministry. All right, we'll leave it right here. We sure appreciate you listening, and thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you on part 2 of The Effective Christian Manager next week. Good night.